The air in the Barcaldine town hall was thick with expectation, the kind of quiet hum you only get in regional Queensland when something truly significant is about to happen. It was a Monday evening, the 18th of March, and the Treasurer Jim Chalmers stood before a crowd that felt the weight of history in their bones. This wasn't a room full of economists in Melbourne, far from it. This was the spiritual home of the Labor Party, the Australian Workers' Heritage Centre. A place where the very idea of a fair go was forged in the heat of shearers' strikes and political struggle. As Chalmers spoke, the promise of reform hung in the air, a whisper of a new Australia, yet beyond the speeches and the symbolism a different reality was unfolding. A slow-burning crisis that would test the Albanese government's resolve in ways few anticipated. The question wasn't just what they would do, but how much they could truly change when the very foundations of economic stability were shifting beneath their feet. The people in that Barcaldine hall were in many ways the bedrock of modern Australia. They were the truck drivers from Longreach, the nurses from Rockhampton, the small business owners struggling with rising costs, the retirees in their modest homes in Toowoomba watching their superannuation balances fluctuate. Their lives and their hopes were tied to the promises made by the Labor government. Anthony Albanese, a man who rose from the Housing Commission flats of Camperdown, understood the struggles of everyday Australians. His cabinet, a mix of seasoned politicians and new blood, had come to power on a wave of cautious optimism, promising to tackle the cost of living, strengthen Medicare, and ensure secure jobs. They were committed to a vision of an Australia where everyone had a chance to get ahead, where the social safety net remained strong, and where the relentless pressure of bills didn't crush the spirit. For many, particularly those living beyond the comfortable confines of Sydney's eastern suburbs or Melbourne's leafy inner north, the government represented a chance to claw back some of the stability that felt like it was slipping away. Their behaviour was one of hope, but also of a quiet, weary skepticism born from years of political promises that often felt hollow. Then came the incident, or rather the confluence of incidents, that began to chip away at that optimism. The rising inflation, initially dismissed as a temporary post-pandemic blip, proved stubbornly persistent. Interest rates, once impossibly low, began to climb, pushing mortgage repayments in places like Penrith in Western Sydney or Cranbourne in Melbourne's outer southeast into unsustainable territory for many families. Petrol prices at the Bowser in Ipswich, Queensland, or Mandurah, Western Australia, became a daily anxiety. The cost of a basic shop at Woolworths or Coles in any regional centre, from Shepparton in Victoria to Geraldton in WA, was spiralling upwards. Then the global stage intervened. A prolonged and brutal conflict in the Middle East, far removed from the red dust of Barcaldine, began to send shockwaves through international markets, threatening supply chains and driving up the cost of essential goods. The budget, already stretched by pre-election promises and the lingering economic effects of the pandemic, suddenly looked precarious. The Treasurer Jim Chalmers was forced to stand before not just the union faithful in Barcaldine but also business economists in Melbourne, warning of severe budget damage. It was a stark realisation the government's ambitious reform agenda, designed to deliver a fair go through stronger social services and better wages, was now facing headwinds of an intensity few had predicted. Would they pivot or hold the line? The question hung heavy in the air. The challenge for the government wasn't a single tribunal battle, but a constant grinding war against economic forces and competing demands playing out on multiple fronts. Each cabinet meeting, each budget consultation became a form of high-stakes negotiation and internal Tribunal of priorities. Imagine you're in that room trying to balance the urgent need for cost of living relief with the long-term vision of structural reform. On one side you have the clamor for immediate action, calls to increase jobseeker payments to boost Medicare funding to ease pressure on an overstretched healthcare system, or to provide more support for renters struggling under the Residential Tenancies Act, which in states like Victoria can feel inadequate against rapidly rising rents. On the other, the imperative to maintain fiscal discipline to keep the national debt manageable and to ensure Australia remains an attractive place for investment. The arguments made were often diametrically opposed. One faction representing the traditional Labor base argued for bold interventions, pointing to the spirit of the Fair Work Act 2009 and the need for government to actively shape the economy for the benefit of working people. Another, more fiscally conservative wing stressed caution, wary of stoking further inflation or damaging the nation's credit rating. Evidence presented wasn't just economic data but lived experience stories of families in Blacktown, New South Wales cutting back on fresh food, or small businesses in Geelong, Victoria, struggling to pay their staff and their energy bills. What was at stake wasn't just a budget surplus or deficit but the very trust of the Australian people in their government's ability to deliver on its foundational promises. Could they organise a coherent path forward, or would they be paralysed by the competing stresses? The resolution, if it can be called that, wasn't a single definitive ruling but an ongoing, evolving compromise. The government didn't abandon its reform agenda, but it certainly softened some of its edges and stretched out the timeline. We saw a measured approach to increasing social support rather than the sweeping changes some had hoped for. There were targeted cost of living measures, some relief on energy bills for instance, and a commitment to strengthening Medicare, but without the radical overhaul many in the healthcare sector believed was necessary. The Fair Work Commission continued its work on wage cases, and while there was some wins for workers, the broader economic climate meant that significant across-the-board wage increases remained a challenge. The government walked a tightrope, trying to show it was delivering a fair go, without triggering further inflation or spooking the markets. It was a victory of pragmatism over pure ideology, a testament to the difficult reality of governing in a complex global environment. Justice in this context wasn't a clear-cut verdict but a messy ongoing effort to balance competing needs and manage expectations. The outcome wasn't a triumphant declaration but a quiet, steady course correction, acknowledging the immense pressure without completely abandoning the original mission. It left many feeling that while progress was being made, the defining tests of reform were still very much ahead. So what does all of this mean for everyday Australians? It means that your government is navigating incredibly complex waters, and the promises made on the campaign trail are always subject to the harsh realities of global economics. But it also means that your rights and the institutions designed to protect them